December 9, 1940, 05 hours, Nibewa Camp, near the Egyptian-Libyan border. The air in the Libyan desert at 5 in the morning is a paradox. It is bone-chillingly cold, yet it carries the dry metallic scent of the coming heat. Inside the fortified camp of Nibewa, Italian soldiers of the Maletti group are waking to the smell of strong espresso and the rustle of sand against canvas. They feel secure. Why shouldn't they? Behind them lies a string of massive reinforced camps stretching back to the port of Tobruk. They outnumber the British forces in North Africa by nearly 5-1. General Pietro Maletti, a veteran of the colonial wars, surveys his perimeter. He has dozens of M1139 tanks and L3 tankettes, small, nimble machines that have served the Italian army well. To Maletti and his men, the British Western Desert Force is a joke. They've spent months mocking the British for their slow movements and their reliance on a handful of aging armored cars. The Italians have the black shirts, the elite divisions, and the sheer weight of Mussolini's ambition. They believe the British are simply waiting for the right moment to evacuate to Cairo. You can almost feel the smugness in the camp as the sun begins to peek over the horizon. The Italian crews are casually performing maintenance on their 40mm anti-tank guns. These guns are their pride, capable, they believe, of piercing any armor the desert rats could possibly throw at them. Then, the silence of the desert is torn apart. It starts as a low-frequency vibration in the soles of their boots. It's not the sharp rattle of the light British cruisers they've seen before. This is deeper. It is the sound of heavy machinery moving with a slow, terrifying purpose. Suddenly, through the haze of the morning mist and kicked-up sand, shapes begin to materialize. They look like moving fortresses. These are the Matilda II infantry tanks of the 7th Royal Tank Regiment. They aren't fast, moving at a literal walking pace, but they are massive. Their cast steel hulls are thick, rounded, and imposing. To the Italian scouts peering through their binoculars, the Matildas look like prehistoric beasts emerging from the dust. "Open fire!" the Italian officers scream. The 47mm anti-tank guns roar to life. The gunners are professionals. They find their range quickly. You see the flashes of impact as the Italian shells strike the lead Matildas square on the nose. In any other battle, against any other tank, this would be the end. A direct hit from a 47mm round should turn a tank into a funeral pyre. The Italian crews cheer as they see the smoke from the hits. But as the smoke clears, the cheering dies in their throats. The Matildas haven't stopped. They haven't even slowed down. The Italian shells didn't penetrate. They didn't even dent the steel. They simply sparked and hissed, bouncing off the 78mm thick Matilda armor like pebbles thrown at a castle wall. A cold, paralyzing realization begins to wash over the camp. They are firing everything they have, and it's doing nothing. The desert rats aren't scurrying, they are hunting. And they are now less than 500 yards from the camp gates. The sound inside the Italian gun pits is no longer the rhythm of a professional battery. It is the frantic, jagged noise of panic. Crack-bang, crack-bang. Every few seconds, another 47mm shell screams across the sand and slams into the leading British tanks. And every single time, the result is the same. A brilliant flash of sparks, a violent metallic clang that rings out across the desert like a hammer hitting an anvil. And then, nothing. The Matilda IIs simply keep crawling forward, their heavy tracks grinding the desert scrub into fine powder. To the Italian gunners, it feels like they are fighting ghosts or monsters from another century. You can see the sweat pouring down the face of a young corporal from Naples as he frantically rams another shell into the breach. He has been trained to believe in the superiority of Italian steel, but now his hands are shaking so violently he can barely grip the brass casing. He watches through his sight as a Matilda, specifically Phantom, of the 7th Royal Tank Regiment, turns its turret toward his position. It moves with a slow, mechanical inevitability. It doesn't need to rush. It knows it is safe. Inside the British tanks, the crews are experiencing a sensation they never expected. Boredom mixed with a strange, surreal sense of invulnerability. The commander of one Matilda, a veteran sergeant, later described the sound of Italian fire hitting his hull as like someone throwing handfuls of dried peas at a tin shed. The British tankers don't even bother to take evasive maneuvers. Why zigzag when the enemy's best weapon is as harmless as a toy? The Matildas reach the perimeter wire of Nibewa. They don't look for a gate. They simply roll over the defenses, the heavy coils of barbed wire, snapping like thread under 26 tons of cast iron. In the center of the camp, General Pietro Maletti emerges from his tent. He is a man of the old school, a veteran who expects his soldiers to stand and die with honor. But as he looks out over his command, he sees a scene from a nightmare. His own tanks, the M1139s, are being systematically dismantled. The Italian tanks were designed for mobility in the mountains, but here they are nothing more than thin-skinned targets. The British 2-pounder guns on the Matildas are punching clean through the Italian hulls, turning the cramped interiors into charnel houses of jagged metal and fire. Maletti, realizing that the desert rats he once mocked have brought a god of war to his doorstep, does the only thing his honor allows. He grabs a machine gun and steps out into the open, firing burst after burst at the oncoming wall of steel. It is a suicide mission. A Matilda turret traverses, the long barrel of its gun dipping slightly. Single high-explosive shell ends the general's defiance in a bloom of fire and dust. With their commander dead and their weapons useless, the psychological cord snaps for the Italian defenders. This isn't a battle anymore, it's an execution. Thousands of men, the elite of Mussolini's North African force, begin to drop their rifles. They aren't just surrendering to the British soldiers, they are surrendering to the impossibility of the Matilda. As the sun rises higher, the dust begins to settle over Nibewa. In less than 2 hours, a single battalion of British tanks has shattered an entire armored group. But this was only the first camp. Further into the desert lie the massive fortifications of Tumur and the great fortress of Bardaya. The British commanders look at the thousands of prisoners clogging the desert tracks and realize they have a new problem. They have captured more men than they have soldiers to guard them. But the real question remains, can this Queen of the Desert repeat this miracle, or will the Italians find a way to pierce the skin of the invincible ghost before they reach the heart of Libya? The dust from the fall of Nibewa hasn't even settled before the British Queen of the Desert turns her sights toward the next domino, the fortified camps of Tumur. By now the word is spreading through the Italian ranks like a wildfire in a dry gale. It's no longer just a rumor, it's a terrifying, tangible reality. Soldiers whisper of "I carry armati d'acciaio che non muoiono," the steel tanks that do not die. You can see the shift in the eyes of the Italian prisoners being herded into the desert sun. These were the men who, just weeks ago, were writing letters home about the glorious march to Cairo. Now they look at the Matilda IIs idling nearby and cross themselves as if looking at a vengeful god. The Italian officers, once so meticulously groomed and radiating Roman pride, stand in the sand with their heads bowed. Their pistols have been tossed into heaps. Their maps of Egypt are now nothing more than scrap paper for the British Tommies. But the real shock is yet to come. As the 7th Royal Tank Regiment reaches the Tumur camps, they find the Italians waiting. At Tumur West, the defenders attempt a desperate stand. They bring up their heavy 75mm field guns, artillery pieces that should, by all laws of physics, be able to stop any tank. The Matilda crews don't flinch. They simply button up their hatches and drive straight into the mouth of the Italian cannons. Imagine the scene from the perspective of an Italian gunner. You are screaming orders, your crew is working like a machine, and you score a direct hit on the leading British tank at point-blank range. The explosion is deafening. The Matilda is obscured by a mountain of fire and black smoke. You allow yourself 1 second of triumph. But then, like a phantom emerging from the underworld, the Matilda rolls out of the smoke. Its engine is roaring, its machine guns are spitting lead, and there isn't so much as a scratch on its turret. The psychological effect is devastating. It isn't just a tactical defeat, it is a total collapse of the will to fight. When the primary weapon of a soldier becomes useless, the soldier ceases to exist. At the Tummer camps, the surrender isn't in small groups, it is by the thousands. By the time the British forces reach the massive fortress of Bardia, the numbers are becoming absurd. The Desert Rats, a force of roughly 30,000 men, find themselves facing an Italian garrison of 45,000. On paper, the British should be slaughtered. In reality, the British commanders are actually worried, not about the battle, but about where they are going to put all the prisoners. At Bardia, the scene is surreal. The Matildas crash through the outer perimeters, and instead of a fierce house-to-house struggle, they find thousands of Italian soldiers standing by the roadside with their suitcases packed. They aren't waiting to fight. They are waiting for the Invincible tanks to give them permission to stop. The British 7th Armored Division watches in disbelief as endless columns of field gray uniforms begin to march eastward, into captivity. There are so many prisoners that the British don't even have enough trucks to transport them. They simply point toward Egypt and tell the Italians to start walking. But as the British celebrate this miraculous victory, a dark cloud is forming on the northern horizon. In Rome, a humiliated Mussolini is screaming for help. And in Berlin, Adolf Hitler is listening. He realizes that if he doesn't act, the Mediterranean will indeed become a British lake. He turns to his most daring commander, a man who understands speed and steel better than anyone else. The era of the soft Italian conquest is over. The Desert Fox is preparing to sail for Africa, and he's bringing a very different kind of tank with him.